we do not have enough energy to expend on things that aren't even true, right? And there might objectively be things in someone's life that warrant sadness, that warrant feeling discouraged. And that's going to be enough to contend with without all these extra thoughts and half-truths that are just dancing around in our mind, bringing us down even more, right? So the beauty is one step at a time, right? All these great resources you're providing for us, Zack. There is a path out. There is hope. Being in that state is treatable. There can be improvement. There is improvement. We see that improvement. And at Lion Counseling, right, when we do work with guys one-on-one, we don't even diagnose. Like we don't play the insurance game. We don't diagnose. We just say, what are you going through? What are your symptoms? How do we get from point A to point B? So for some people, a label is helpful because it validates their experience. And for others, not so much. It's just like, I don't need a label. This is what I'm going through. And that's okay too. It's like, let's just figure out what you're going through, what your ideal future is, and create a bridge between where you are and where you want to be. And yeah, there definitely is hope because we've seen it. As hard as a struggle as it can be sometimes to feel like when you're in that down state, how to move forward. Again, taking that one step, putting in practice some of these tools. After a while, you look back and there's momentum, right? There's momentum, and you're moving in the right direction.
100%. Yeah.
Welcome everyone to the Lion Counseling Podcast. I'm Mark Odland, founder of Lion Counseling and certified EMDR therapist.
I'm Zack Carter, counselor and coach.
And our mission is to help men to break free, to heal deep, and to become the lions they were created to be. Depression. Depression is something that will touch most of our lives, whether it's us or someone we know. Everyone feels sad in life. Everyone experiences grief. But depression is a serious and unique thing that's legit and isn't always as easy as just quote unquote getting over it. And so we're going to dive into that today. We're going to talk about the 3 mindsets of depression and how to fix them. And make sure to hang on till the end because we've got a lot of great content for you guys. And since you're already here, if you could hit that subscribe button, we'd really appreciate it. It helps the algorithm, helps us get the word out to more guys so we can help more men. All right, Zack, let's jump in.
Escape the cage now. Be the lion you was destined to be. Born ready for the war, now my effort is free. The level's been set, time to wrestle the beast. Testing my G, it's getting heavy indeed. The struggle I embrace now, never retreat. I see the test as a blessing indeed. I'm taking steps on the treacherous peak. Now it's destined to be. I'm on my destiny's feet. Shine with the one piece.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so depression is really tricky, man. People that suffer from this really have a hard time getting out of it. And we're not going to go too much into diagnosable criteria, but suffice it to say, it's not just about sadness. It's lack of energy. It's lack of motivation. It's difficulty feeling, right? So feeling numb oftentimes, right? So it can include sadness. It can include suicidal ideation. So there's like a lot of different things that could be included. But there's some common mindsets that as counselors, Mark and I are going to be looking for in someone that might have depression, whether it's clinically diagnosed or just, a lower level of it, right? And so there's 3 common mindsets that we see. And so I'm going to lay them out and then we'll go into each one and what they mean exactly. So number 1, it's what we call a selection bias towards the negative. What does that mean? It means that typically a person with a depressed mindset, they discount the positive things that are happening in their life, right? They don't even notice them. And it's not even that they're intentionally doing it. It just doesn't register, right? So when I was thinking about what this may look like, throughout most of my life, I've played in worship bands at church. And if you've never been in a worship band, a common thing that happens behind the scenes that people in the church don't see is that you go out, you play the set, you go back, and everybody talks about all the mistakes they made. That's all the worship members, oh man, did you hear when I blew that chord? Or, oh dude, that fill was so dumb. Why did I do that as the drummer? basis. No one cares about basis, so we don't even talk about basis. I'm just playing. I love basis, but no one notices the bass. So sorry if you're a bassist. But it's important. They are important. So yeah, so like it's very common that like the worship team like goes back and like what happens? All they can focus on is the negative. It doesn't matter if 98% of the songs went perfectly. They're gonna fixate on those mistakes, right? So that's what selection bias towards the negative looks like, right? So we're discounting the positive, only focusing on the negative. Number 2 is an overgeneralization of negative memories. Okay? So life has never been good. Things never go well for me. Things are always bad. I always fail. Right? So it's over. You have a few bad things that happen and you blow it up and say like, this is my whole life. Like this is everything that happens to me. And so an example of like an overgeneralization for me, fortunately, I haven't really ever suffered from depression, but for a long time I called myself lazy, and I might have talked about this in a previous podcast. Yeah. And so like I overgeneralized. I'm like, sure. I'm always lazy. I'm always just procrastinating and not doing what I need to do. And not to get too ahead of myself on solutions, but like I actually sat down and like laid out, is this true or not? And when I did that, I found it wasn't lazy. Like sometimes I procrastinate, but sometimes isn't always. But when we overgeneralize, especially if we're feeling depressed, it feels like it's always. Okay, so number 1 is selection bias towards the negative, so not paying attention to the positive. Second is saying that everything is negative, right? All the things in my life are negative. And then the last thing is negative interpretations of ambiguous events. What the heck does that mean? So you have like a neutral thing that happens, right? You go into the break room, one of your coworkers doesn't acknowledge you or even say hi, and you have the thought, oh, they don't like me. Or, oh, what did I do wrong? Did I hurt their feelings? Like, oh, I must have done something wrong, right? So it's neutral. We don't know what's going on. They could have had someone that just passed away, but we make it about ourselves in depression, right? It's about us. We're self-focused. It's like, oh, it must be me in some way, right? So we take neutral events, ambiguous events, and we turn them negative, right? Sure. So those are 3 examples of some common mindsets we see in depression. Selection bias towards the negative. We discount the positive. We overgeneralize negative memories. Some negative things happen, so that's our life. And then 3, we interpret neutral events as negative. Mark, any thoughts?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. I think it's interesting too because we live in this unique moment in history where, at least in America, in Western countries, there's a lot of prosperity. Civilization has, not to minimize, people are going through rough stuff, but as a whole in society, there's been a lot of innovation, a lot of technology that's lifted us out of a lot of the things that would have killed us 100 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. Life expectancy is a lot higher than it was for our ancestors. And I'm just thinking, for our ancestors, having that negative mindset actually might have had some survival value. But the problem is we don't quite live in that same context anymore, right? And so thinking there's danger around every corner, like there might have been in certain situations, in certain times in history, it's not typically the case, right? For most of us. And so it's one of those things where the mindset no longer fits the situation and it's no longer helpful. But the wrinkle in that is, in some ways, there's the illusion that it can be. A lot of the guys we work with are pretty successful guys. A lot of them are business leaders, entrepreneurs. And I mean, there's high profile billionaires who will say things like, only the paranoid survive, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, whoa, that's great business advice. Maybe, but maybe not the best mental health advice, right? So in this competitive world that we live in, for guys, there can be a temptation to kind of double down on that negative thinking, glass half empty, what's missing, where's the danger? And that kind of feeds into our wiring to be a good provider and protector too. But like so many things, there's something to be said for moderation and something to be said for kind of dialing things back and taking a fresh look objectively as like, what is my mindset? What is my mindset? Am I falling into this trap? And let's be honest, even if you're rocking it pretty well, if you're depressed, if you're down, if you're, as they said, and as you're talking about this, Zach, I thought about one of my most famous artists of the Renaissance was this German artist named Albrecht Dürer,
Mm-hmm.
and he has this famous engraving called Melancholia, and it's this angel just sitting there looking super sad, and there's like all these unique symbols. So the people who watched my conversation with Jonathan Pageau about symbolism and memory, that's something to check out for you guys too, because this idea that this has been with us, we haven't always called it the same thing throughout history, but it's been a common struggle throughout history. No matter how bright, how tough, how strong, how innovative you might be, you are not immune to getting stuck in a rut, falling into one of these mindsets. And so I think, all that being said, I think it's so good that you're drawing awareness to this.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we've got a segment of the guys who listen to us who are like, dude, all this stuff is so wimpy, and like, just step it up, just get over it, push through. It's like, yes, there's a place for that. But being sad is not the same thing as being hit for months on end with something that is not only mental, but also you feel it physically, and it saps your motivation and makes you feel hopeless. And no matter how hard you try, you can't seem to get out of it on your own.
Mm-hmm.
That's where some tools, some support, a little extra nudge from the outside can make all the difference.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, and so it sounds like, what you're saying is this emotion, whether it's anxiety or depression, can be kind of a double-edged sword. So like beating yourself up, pushing yourself hard can be beneficial in some ways, but can also, if you're outside of moderation, it can really hold you back, really harm you.
Yeah.
I think that's really well said. Well, and so what do you do for these three different types of thinking patterns? So like, how do we fix it then? So I know, especially with a lot of the clients I've worked that are depressed, a lot of these solutions sometimes feel like they're not going to work. And it's one of these things that we practice over time, and we hope for small incremental improvements over time, right? And can we get 1% better each day? And so sometimes I'll work with a client where, I ask them, how are you doing individually? 0 to 10. 10 being amazing, 0 being the worst you could possibly be. And so they're hanging out at a 2 or 2.5 for months while we're working together. And then we do a few things, and suddenly it's like 2.75. And I'm like stoked. I'm like, let's go, 2.75. But it's like, once again, in the depressed mindset, it's like, what does that even mean? Like, that hasn't done anything, right? And so it is playing the long game. It is saying like, hey, I got to do a bunch of little things, and little things add up. And hopefully over time, what I begin to see is I can move from that 2.5 to 2.75 to 3 to 4 to 5, right? And so that's kind of what we're hoping for a lot of times, right? Is that like, hey, let's make small incremental permanent changes, as permanent as we can, and keep those going to like make you feel better. So what do we do? Selection bias towards the negative. Okay, so discounting the positive, right? So you're with the worship team members in the back, and they're all complaining, noticing the things that only went wrong. Well, you sit and you gather evidence. So kind of like I was talking about a minute ago around calling myself lazy, I made a list, a pro-con list, which sounds cliched, but it's cliched for a reason because it actually works. And so I listed, here are all the things I've done to show that I'm not lazy, and here are the things I've done to show I am lazy, right? So it's not that we're being Pollyanna, that we're just like, oh, everything's great. No, you like look for the truth. Like, and so if your mindset is actually not accurate, I can't tell you how many clients I've had that have depressive symptoms, that when we take a thought and we begin to analyze it, there's like 12 things proving that thought wrong and like 3 things saying it is true, right? So sometimes our depressive thinking isn't accurate, right? So we make our list, like, and say like, okay, am I just selecting for just the negative, or am I also beginning to pay attention to what's happening that's positive as well? Right? So that's how to help with the selection bias towards the negative. The overgeneralization, right? So this is where maybe we need a little extra Pollyanna. Maybe we need a little extra positivity and practice that. And so in our happiness podcast, we talked about journaling 3 positive things a day. And if you do that over 21 days, you begin to think more positively. You can also do it with a loved one. And so this makes for a really good activity with your wife, your spouse. This makes for a really good activity with buddies. Hey, dude, what's been going good this week for you? Right? You get that conversation going instead of like, here's the list of everything that's going wrong. Right? And begin to practice paying attention to the positive. Right? Lastly, the negative interpretation of ambiguous events. Right? So this in cognitive behavioral therapy, we call this emotional reasoning. That we're like, they must hate me because I feel that that's true, so that must be true. Right? So what do we do about that? Well, we ask ourselves questions, right? You don't tell yourself, hey, why are you doing this again? Okay, so that's judgment behind that question. Why am I doing this again? Right, so that's curiosity. That's a different question. Even if it's the same words, it's a different question by how you're approaching it, right? And so a really great question you can ask yourself is, okay, I went into the break room. This dude didn't talk to me. Okay, maybe he doesn't like me. Maybe he does. Maybe I did do something wrong. Those are possibilities. Are there other ways of thinking about this? Are there other ways, other things that could be going on outside of me that he would be acting this way? And then well, maybe the boss yelled at him. Maybe he had in a fight with his wife. Maybe a loved one passed away. Maybe he's just having a bad day, right? And so then you begin to say, okay, well, you begin to like let go of that particular thought more and more as you're like, unless this person tells me what's going on, I can assume maybe it's something outside of me. So those are kind of the 3 mindsets and what to do about them. Mark, any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I think that's so helpful, Zach. It was kind of cool. This last week, I had a chance to do some consultation with the folks over at the Daniel Amen Clinic, and
cool.
They're famous for scanning brains, right, and diagnosing things like ADHD, depression through brain scans, and they literally see how the blood flow is going to all the wrong places when we're thinking negative thoughts and we're in a down, depressed, kind of melancholy state, right? And so, one of the things Dr. Amen talked about with his famous acronym, right, with the ANTs, the automatic negative thoughts that we've talked about on the podcast, is to be a detective, to be like just a ruthless detective of our own thoughts. Because man, life is tough. Life is even with a good life has a lot of hard things, a lot of ups and downs. We do not have enough energy to expend on things that aren't even true, right? And there might objectively be things in someone's life that warrant sadness, that warrant feeling discouraged. And that's going to be enough to contend with without all these extra thoughts and half-truths that are just dancing around in our mind, bringing us down even more, right? So the beauty is one step at a time, right? All these great resources you're providing for us, Zach. There is a path out. There is hope. Being in that state is treatable. There can be improvement. There is improvement. We see that improvement. And at Lion Counseling, right, when we do work with guys one-on-one, we don't even diagnose. Like we don't play the insurance game. We don't diagnose. We just say, what are you going through? What are your symptoms? How do we get from point A to point B? So for some people, a label is helpful because it validates their experience. And for others, not so much. It's just like, I don't need a label. This is what I'm going through. And that's okay too. It's like, let's just figure out what you're going through, what your ideal future is, and create a bridge between where you are and where you want to be. And yeah, there definitely is hope because we've seen it. As hard as a struggle as it can be sometimes to feel like when you're in that down state, how to move forward. Again, taking that one step, putting in practice some of these tools. After a while, you look back and there's momentum, right? There's momentum, and you're moving in the right direction.
100%. Yeah. And if y'all haven't gone and listened to Daniel Amen stuff, go find some interviews online. Daniel Amen's the best. So
So good.
awesome. I love the reference. Well, so in summary, got a fun graph that we can share before we kind of wrap, just as kind of like to further solidify what we're talking about today. So what we're seeing here is that we've got kind of a healthy outlook on life. We've got a depressed outlook. We've got positive situations, neutral situations, negative situations, right? And so what you'll notice along the top of the graph is that for a healthy outlook, a positive situation happens and they have a +1. Okay, something good happened today. All right, a neutral event like that coworker in the break room. Well, maybe it was positive, maybe it's negative. Who knows, right? And so, a healthier mindset. Maybe it's a 0. I just don't know. It's ambiguous, right?
Yeah.
Lastly, we've got like a negative situation. Okay, it's -1, right? So once again, we're not trying to pretend that bad things don't happen. Like bad things happen. Okay, so like let's take account for that, right? And so like what we see for the total is that like okay for a regular healthy mindset, maybe that equals out to be 0. Okay, that's like a normal day, right? We've got some good things, some bad things, some neutral things. Okay. And with the depressed mindset, right, when we do the selection bias towards the negative, when we're discounting the positive, that positive situation goes from a 1 to a 0. It's like it didn't even happen, right? In that neutral situation, it's not a 0. It turns to a -1. Like, oh, this must be a bad thing that just happened.
Okay.
And then for a negative situation, yeah, we pay attention to it, right? So that's -1. So what you see is that for a healthier mindset, okay, it all kind of equals out. It's about a 0. For a depressed mindset, goes to -2, right? So this is why depression is so hard to beat, is that you're living your life in -2 all the time, right? So when you take these things, you say like, okay, how can I turn that 0 into a 1, right? So this is what we're talking about, where you're journaling positive things that are happening. You're talking to people. Like that's where you start. Instead of me first thing talking to friends about everything that's going wrong, what's going right? Okay, let's talk about the good things that are happening in life. Okay, we've turned that 0 into a 1. For the neutral situation, you're asking yourself questions. Okay, am I seeing this in a realistic way, or am I just seeing it in an emotional way? So we turn that -1 into a 0. And then the negative situations, okay, like we can pray, exercise,
Yeah.
we can spend time with friends and family. We can do things to kind of help to cope with the negative things that happen in life. And so we go from that -2 to a 0. That's the goal, right? So that's all I got. Mark, any last final thoughts that you have on your end?
No, that's awesome, Zach. I know just statistically, there's a high likelihood that a certain percentage of guys listening to this are going through something like that, or they know someone they love is experiencing something like that. And if we're not careful, it can feel really discouraging. And it's just good for you guys listening out there to know that there is hope. There can be a plan. And we're not going to sugarcoat it. It's going to take some work, right? It's going to take some work. It's going to not be easy, but there is good on the other side. There is hope. And we see it with the guys we work with, and we see it with our listeners, with the amazing comments that they post. And so if you are listening, if you've hung on this long, drop a comment below. Let us know what fits, what makes sense for you about this. Do you have any other ideas that have worked for you in your life that have helped you kind of climb out of the pit, right? With the right help, with the right tools, with the right mindset, right? And if you are still here, appreciate the content. If you could subscribe, we'd really appreciate it. It certainly makes a big difference with our channel, and we're getting closer and closer to that goal of 10,000 subscribers, and you guys are a big part of that. So thank you all. Check us out at escapethecagenow.com if you want a free consult with Zach or myself, and we'd be happy to chat. Talk to you later.
Bye, everybody.